All right, well, why don't we go ahead and get started? Thank you all very much for being here. And many of you have now had a long day with starting with your team time this morning. So really grateful for you to be here and welcome. For those of you who don't know, I'm Randy Bass. I'm from Georgetown, and I'm just moderating this session. And we're really excited to dig into this topic. We have three folks with us joining us. Two will be presenting formally, and one will be serving as a respondent and discussant. Craig Meyer from Jackson State, Michael Meaney from Arizona State, and Mohammed Khalil from the University of Bergen, who we're especially grateful is joining us, in which it's like 8 o'clock at night or something. He's joining us from Norway, so thank you for being willing to come on this time of night, but it's great to have everybody here. So let me just give a little bit of framing for this, just a little bit, and then I'm going to have each of our three guests introduce themselves, and I'll say a little bit about what the workflow, what the flow is going to be, and then we'll dig in. So what are we talking about when we're talking about AI in this session? So I guess the shortest version of this session is to say we want to explore where we're at with AI tools, and look at it through an equity lens in ways that are appropriate to the Institute. So that's really what we're doing here. We're looking at a lot of different dimensions about AI tools and just asking how we can think about them in the equity context. So the two questions that I think we really want to structure the whole session, and our speakers will speak to them, we hope that we can have discussion as well and questions from all of you, is all technologies and all innovations, you could say, but especially all educational technologies, all technologies make claims that they're going to help address issues of equity and a greater, more democratic distribution of resources, but oftentimes they can result in the opposite. So the two driving questions for this session is really, how might AI tools advance the work of equity, and how might they make inequity worse? And we really want to kind of work on both sides of that line throughout the session. In addition to that, we're also trying to think in terms of short term, like the adaptation and integration of the current tools. Obviously, ChatGPT and similar generative AI tools are the most on our mind right now. But we also want to think about and have some fantastic expertise in the room with us about medium and long-term innovation that will maybe make possible what wasn't possible before, and things that actually could really help to democratize transformative education. And then ultimately, in keeping with the goals of the entire Institute, we want to make sure that we're talking a little bit about how can this matter with what you do when you go back to campus. Maybe it's the kind of conversations you have, maybe it's the people you connect to, maybe it's things that are on your mind in terms of practices. So that's what we hope the session will be. And, you know, I think just to say, and this is my only other slide before I ask our friends to introduce themselves, is that with AI tools, especially ChatGPT and similar tools, we're at a state of a kind of spectrum that, on the one hand, I think that what's on a lot of faculty's mind looking at the fall, there's something about this moment that reminds me of sort of June of 2020. We'd already pivoted to remote, and now we're looking to the fall to ask, how can we actually get this more right? When we look at the fall, I think some people are thinking that with AI tools, you know, we're kind of been blindsided by them, trying to assimilate them. Can we get a little bit more intentional? But for a lot of faculty, that'll mean regulating them or restricting their use. For some, it might be avoiding or sidestepping. The Harvard Teaching Center calls this outflanking. But then there are also ways to think about integrating them and incorporating them creatively into your pedagogies. And a lot of faculty are thinking about that. And then there's something even beyond that. So if we think about integrating, you know, that could also mean different things. How do we help our students learn to use them responsibly? But how do we help them use them creatively, the workflow of paper design, et cetera? But then also, how can we really start thinking in more innovative ways? And again, beyond integration are the bigger questions about how can we even reimagine what's possible. So I think we're going to be all over this spectrum today, and I hope that we are, because in a sense, we need to, this is all very fluid, and we need to be kind of thinking about this full picture, but acknowledging that a lot of faculty and staff are at the regulate and adapt end, but that we're all trying to think at the more imaginative, innovative, and integrative end of the spectrum as well. So with that, let me just invite each of our speakers to just briefly introduce themselves. Then I'll say a word about how we start, and then I'll turn it over to Craig to be our first presenter. So first, Craig, why don't you introduce yourself? Just say who you are, where you work, et cetera, and then we'll move around, all three of you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Craig Meyer. I'm at Jackson State. I'm Associate Professor of English and Director of the Writing Program. My research focuses a lot on ethos, a lot on rhetoric and sort of rhetorical history, and also incorporating it into current usage.
Great. Thank you. Mike?
Hi, everyone. My name is Mike Meaney. I'm a visiting research scholar at Arizona State University, and I work for a startup called Multiverse, which is building a digital apprenticeship platform for the US. And my academic research interest is predominantly massive open online courses and other forms of digital distance education. How to design those kinds of courses so that they can be inclusive, and how they can also often reproduce inequality. And I'll pass to Mohammed.
Yeah, thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Mohammed Khalil, and I'm a senior researcher from University of Bergen. And Bergen is the second largest city after Oslo in Norway. So I did my PhD in a field called learning analytics, and I'm continuing that at the center that I'm at. My recent research interest as well is using responsible learning analytics, and that of course includes privacy, security, and equity with the algorithms used in learning analytics, and that was also very much connected to AI in education. And I have been here in Norway for like 5 years, but I did my PhD in Austria, also in Europe. Yeah, I've been here for like around 7 years, 8 years. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. We're really thrilled to have all of you. Whoops. Sorry about that. I'll stop sharing in just a moment. What we're going to do is Craig will go first and go for 10, 12 minutes, talk about with really focusing more on the pedagogical side and the on the ground side of how to think about these tools in the classroom short term. And then I'll ask Mike to speak, and he'll talk more broadly about equitable learning systems at scale. And then we'll have a little bit of questions and Q&A and back and forth. And then I'll invite Mohammed to make some responsive comments to everything he's heard. And then we'll then have the rest of the time as discussion and Q&A. So thank you all for being here, and I'll turn it over to Craig.
Okay, thank you. Let me get this going. So in just a moment, you'll be able to see my screen. This is, of course, the title of my presentation. Today's a day, that's where I am. Let's get right to it. I'm starting going backwards, so like a little bit, because I think it's important. Why am I not working here? Okay, here we go. So I thought it was important to go backwards so a little bit, because every semester and each year, I take some time and I kind of ground myself, being mindful of students so coming in and where they are at in life. And so I think of when they were born and what they've lived through. Like, for example, I know exactly where I was on 9/11. Most students don't, because they weren't alive. So, I mean, they're coming in from 2006 and 2005, somewhere around that range. Prensky's piece about the digital native is based on the model of it. So of the big E word that that we're talking about today. If the parents had access to certain things, tablets and computers and stuff like that, they might be a native. So some students didn't have access to those things, so they can't. So in essence, be yes, we'll be a native. So as part of this, I'm thinking related to AI, how students come in with experience or lack of experience of using tech, and so how they might be able to to interact with it. So I guess my point here, and this is more for myself, but if you find it useful, so go ahead and take it, is make sure I check myself. And with that, I'm getting into all of the other things as what we've learned during the pandemic that students have coming at them. So the only one that's level is your class. So we often see our class as the focus point, right? And I think sometimes I forget that students have other classes and they have a job, and or there might be trauma. They might have lost some family during COVID, or there might be various other kinds of trauma going on. They have their personal time, the tech issues, so your family, etc. But all of it kind of comes around access so as well. So access at this beginning point is one of my focus, always one of my focal points. So as you probably know, the funding to HBCUs and HSIs is lower than PWIs, and so the money is not equal or equitable. Sorry, I stutter. So on occasion, so just bear with me when I do that. And yes, so also there are also, as we know, political agendas going on throughout parts of the United States. The anti-woke agenda, and there is a tax on tenure. And coming from a state that before I came to Jackson State that was attacking that, I had to make adjustments to how I taught and what I would present and how I would present it. So can you be that? So you have to make adjustments so in what you say and what you might do in the classroom based on the political landscape that you might be teaching in. Okay, getting to AI, the basics of that is sometimes at Jackson State, we don't have reliable web. We don't have reliable access. And when that happens, so what do you do? It could be down for 5 minutes. It could be down for 5 hours. We just don't know. So that's part of the access aspect I am referring to. If you haven't used AI, that's an aspect. If you're here, you probably have. One of my mentors talked to me the other day about a piece that he wanted to write and co-author with me. And he was like, so let's use ChatGPT. I'm like, okay, great. So what have you done on ChatGPT like so far? And there was this long pause. And I'm like, why is he pausing? This is uncharacteristic of him. And so then I kind of going to talk some more. And so I sent him some stuff in the minutes that we were talking that I had punched in as prompts to ChatGPT, and I sent it to him. And he texted me back saying, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Which suggested to me that he hadn't used it before. So if you're not using it, you have a hard time getting a grasp of it, and it'll be even harder then to teach it. And then once you're able to use it, then teach it. Can you stay current with all the other things that go along with it as it updates when we get to ChatGPT 4, etc., and all the other AI websites and apps that are available. And once we get through some of that, then we can get to the equity issues. Part of that is what I'm considering so how they're beginning to manage it is what I'm calling fences. And so the enforcement of, so if you go to ChatGPT, so about a month ago or so, I asked it to write a paper on a rather benign topic, and it said, I'm sorry, I can't write a full paper, but what I can do is help you brainstorm and do some other things. So inside the coding, there is some for at least ChatGPT at that time there. So it was saying, hey, I can't do this, but I can help you do this instead. So the other aspect of that is the human feedback. And this relies on us as the users of AI as being good and not being bad. If you've noticed on ChatGPT and some of the others, and I'll show you this real quick, and we'll come back to this in a minute. There is a thumbs up and a thumbs down, a good response or a bad response, right? So that is us telling the AI that, hey, I like that response, or no, I'm not sure about that. Try it. Try it. So try again. But with the human aspect of the reinforcement, it maintains the same issues that we're discussing here. If you remember way back when Wikipedia, basically anyone could go on and change things. Well, that's not the case now, and it's become a fairly reliable source. But way back when, anyone could go in and change things, and it created some of the issues that Wikipedia still has to deal with, that thinking that's no longer the case really with their website. Along with that, there are two other things I want to talk about. One is the blind taste test, and that is, so basically, when you take out the identifiers of, so people that might be the things that create the coming from, like, the biases. It could be name, it could be location, so it could be the school they came from, so things along that line. So by taking those out of what's being put into the coding, it gives you a more reliable, perhaps, data set to work with that is more equitable to see with the people you're working with. And with that, when you have the human aspect and you have the AI aspect, can you replicate the results with just the AI with human influence or input or checking, and just the human results? So that is, do you get the same results? If you're not getting the same results, so then you have some kind of bias or inequitable aspects that that are creeping in. This next part, I've been thinking about how this term leaning, and I haven't seen it used before, and so leaning with AI is it gives us the things that we kind of want. And I'm thinking of when we binge a TV show, or when we scrolling through TikTok. If you have access to a TikTok, if you watch a video like on flipping dressers and making dressers and like doing a refinish job on them, and you watch that whole video, you might make a comment. The next video, guess what, is about is about flipping stuff like that. So it gives us what we're looking for, and that is so guiding us into what it thinks based on the AI, what we may want to be seeing. As we all know, there's a human reliance or over reliance on things we see online as being credible. I mean, I guess going back to, if we see it in print, it must be real because someone has gone through this process, this mystical process of this must be good and credible and valid. And to some degree that's so it's faded away, but that's still out there. And if you catch this reference, it always feels like somebody's watching me. That is kind of that aspect of the AI that I kind of feel that we have a sense of. So with AI, when we engage with it, there's someone back there watching us or tracking us or something along that line. However, I still think there's a hope for AI. I don't think it's the hope. I think it's a hope. And AI can provide models for students, help students brainstorm, create outlines for like with students, and offer suggestions relative to standard. Speaking of models, however, there is still the fear about AI, and that fear creates a stagnation, which I think we're kind of seeing right now. A few months ago, there was a big push for AI tools and things along that line, and right now those tools have not been updated as often. We're still seeing the op-ed pieces come out, but I'm not seeing a whole lot of how to use AI come out in the last few months. There was a big push at the beginning of the year, and the last few months it's kind of faded away, and I'll show that here in a few slides. So the bottom line, at least for me, is the same old story. The same results, the same outcomes, the same things that are on that are on E, so on equal, because access still for me so remains the key factor. And as we noted from the opening keynote from yesterday, that the choir needs to practice, but the choir needs access in order to practice. Some insight into how to use AI in the classroom, and we'll get to some of these so later on, perhaps in like discussion. And I know I'm going very quickly, so I'm on the clock. So part of it of how we can use AI in the classroom is so teaching students to use the AI, which I note down here in the blue, but it's teaching them to use AI in a meaningful way. So versus just putting in a prompt and so using whatever it's given. So it's going back to the old, like, I guess the proverb of teaching them how like the fish versus just giving them the fish. How to manage AI in the classroom or to minimize sometimes its usage. So discussion-based prompts. So the discussions you have in class on various topics. So as students to write a reflective paper about that discussion and how it made them think of the issue in a different way, and then find some sources based on that. So things along that line. So AI right now is not the greatest at recognizing or creating relationships between concepts, sources, and showing nuance. So that's another way not to detect AI, but to be aware of one of the things that AI right now is not the greatest at. I suspect in the coming months, it's going to get better at that aspect. And in the months I've been working with AI, I have seen this improve. So it's something I'm keeping an eye on. So low stakes writing. So in class, I do a lot of this because I get the voice of students in my head. So as students are writing in class and I read their free write slide, for example, when they turn in a paper, if the voice is different, so I have an idea that's not quite the same, it may not be the same person. Of course, we know that ChatGPT and some of the AIs don't do a very good job at finding sources. In fact, they make them up, which I've proven before in some of the other presentations I've done. So meeting with students and helping them brainstorm. So another aspect is showing drafts of work and then having them write a paper or explaining the progression of how they wrote the paper. So unique assignments I kind of discuss up here. So teaching them about AI and then awareness of intersectionality is always going to be something that we need to be mindful of. And I think one of the last points I want to make is you're not using AI, you have to be playing someone now. You have to go and get on ChatGPT or on Google Bard or some of the others that are available. You see some up on my bookmark bar up here. Because it is fun to play with. And I think we learn a lot of how AI operates just by putting in prompts and seeing if we rephrase the prompt, how it's going to change things. And as I mentioned before, some of the resources that I have available, which you'll get in a PDF on the slide, I checked the links, they all work. The MLA and the 4Cs task force, when I clicked on that recently, the most recent update to that was, I think, in March. So again, because we have this little gap of what's been updated in the last few months, and these other two, they're okay. The one that I added for this presentation was this one. That is so again, it's not an endorsement. I mean, just showing that this is a resource that might be that might be available to use. And I want to show you real quickly. I did ask AI vaguely about this prompt here. How can AI be biased, and how do you address from the higher ed? And this is Google Bard, and they note an experiment. I want to bring your attention down here at the bottom too. That it's saying, hey, we may not have it right, so just bear with us. If you haven't used Google Bard before, so it gives you three options. In this case, of basically the same. You've got the bullet points, but I thought this was the better of the two. Again, you don't have sources here, but you have an idea of what the AI is thinking about about itself. And with that, I'm gonna appreciate the discussion and questions that come later on. Thank you. Randy, we can't hear you.
Thank you so much, Craig. Really appreciate that. And I really like your point you made very early, which is the only thing that you can really, that can really be level is your classroom and what you have control over. And so then it seems to me your points about you really need to help people learn how to use it. You have to learn how to use it yourself, but that you really have to think about what is the locus of your control and what's the relationship to leveling the playing field. So really appreciate your thoughts there. Okay, well, let me turn it over to Mike then. And then after Mike, we'll take some questions and have some conversation, and then we'll dig in, and then we'll hear from Mohammed later.
Thanks a lot, Randy, and thanks a lot, Craig. That was really illuminating and helpful, and a number of those things I hadn't thought about. So that was great. So I'm just gonna give you a quick outline of what I'll be speaking about today. So I'm just gonna share two vignettes that I think are quite illustrative of the impact of ChatGPT and AI more broadly on education in a very practical sense, and what I think the lessons from that are. Then I'm also gonna share a little bit from my research area, from the world of massive open online courses and how some of these kind of technological innovations can be hyped and expected to have a positive impact on inequity, but how they can unintentionally and end up reinforcing inequity. And then I'll close that section by just sharing some brief thoughts on the impact of all of this on the labor market. And then I'll end with just some provocations and practical next steps that I would be thinking about if I were on a college campus today. So two quick case studies, if you will. So one of my close friends and mentors, who's a professor, teaches screenwriting. And so his final this past year was to create the rest of a play based on a prompt. And so he gave the following prompt to his class: a brother and sister, after a long travel internationally, arrived home, and they saw that a glass was like shattered all over the ground, and that their window had been broken, and then it ended there. And so he said that he got two different kinds of responses. The first talked about the emotions that the brothers and sisters experienced and felt, how scared they were, how sad they were, hypotheses about what might have happened or who caused this. And then the second set of responses he got were very tactical and forward-looking about how to safely enter the house and search every room to see if anyone was there who was dangerous, and the order to call the cops. And it was just kind of very structured, sequenced information, but it was very emotional. And he was able to, after talking with the students, he quickly figured out which of these two camps had used ChatGPT. The first camp had not, and they generated this sort of authentic emotional take on this play themselves. It was very indexed on kind of the human experience. And then the second group, the rest of the play that they generated was very scripted, incremental, step-by-step, process oriented. So that was interesting. So the second anecdote I want to share, and I kid you not, so Mohammed is one of the reviewers of a journal that I was working on a paper for. And earlier this week, I actually just wanted to see what Chat GPT would generate for this paper that I was writing. And so I typed in, please write a 2,000-word academic article on why the learning analytics community is reproducing inequalities by not disaggregating demographic data and focusing on how to develop online learning for underrepresented audiences. Please include relevant academic citations and bibliography. So I was originally absolutely stunned at what this came up with, because while it was not 2,000 words, it was about 800 words. It had citations, it had a bibliography down below, again, like no joke. Muhammad Khalil is on here. Like, this was just like exactly what I would have thought it came up with. I was super impressed. I ended up writing about something different, but in any event, it was really interesting. However, when I started to read closer, I was noticing all of these errors. And actually, so a number of the citations that it uses, it sort of uses appropriately in the location of the text, and about half of them are accurate, but the other half are writers that write in the field, but actually the papers that Chat GPT cites is not related to the claim it's making. And so I was just really struck by this, because I was like, wow, this looks and feels so impressive and real, but upon further inspection, it's actually slightly off. And so I thought these two cases were interesting. And I think there's kind of two lessons here. So on the positive side, I think with a lens of equity, there's a premium on kind of the human effect, the uniquely human effect that all of us have. So in the case of breaking into a house, the best responses to the play prompt were people who were able to talk about the emotional aspects of experiencing that. And so what is good about that is that young student, learning to cultivate your own voice, having that voice be authentic to yourself and your experiences in your writing and what you create, that can actually be an inclusive form of pedagogy that could really reduce inequity in education. But unfortunately, there are two kind of bigger picture errors. So I call this like the reproduction of minor folly. And so you saw that this kind of breaking into a house, it gave sort of for the other camp, the response to the problem was very templatized and generic and rote. And it was not that creative and interesting. But if someone who's not trained in how to use that as input and then infuse their voice into it, they could end up just copying and pasting and making some slight edits and turning it in, which is what is happening pretty frequently now. And students that have had historical disadvantage in education may or may not know how to navigate this type of minor folly terrain. And then the other kind of minor folly I saw was in the practice paper that I asked it to write, where it had like the right names of the people. These are people in the field, but it was the wrong citations. And also the like writing, if you inspect it further, it's quite bland, it's not novel, and it's not really that usable. So I think what was interesting for me, and I'm just going to jump ahead now, is that as the labor market, which I'll speak about in a moment, kind of evolves to accommodate the development of AI in this way, the human contribution requires a different set of skills than what historically colleges and universities have taught. So there was kind of this former focus on deep mastery of bodies of knowledge, but increasingly the focus of learning will be information retrieval and synthesis instead of mastery. And so knowing how to navigate online tools and knowing the minor follies that these online tools are likely to lead you down, and knowing how to still use that input and correct it, is this very, very ambiguous and nuanced skill set. Then that's what is going to be required of students and workers moving forward. And that's very, very complicated and tricky to teach, and could amplify existing inequalities. The other thing that those two case studies exemplify is that I have a PhD in learning analytics and learning design of digital online courses. And so I was able to read through this and really know what was wrong and what was right about it. But if this was about a field that one of you are in, or, Randy is an English professor and so is Craig, and so maybe they have expertise on a certain area that I would have no idea. I wouldn't actually know that, but I would trust Chat GPT to at least point me in the right direction, and it actually might not. So I think my questions for all of you to reflect on are just like, how can these tools be liberating? How might they reproduce inequalities? How much of this is downstream from what students are learning in K-12? And then, just because I have to wrap up very, very quickly, the really kind of big picture future implication, and I don't have as much time on this as I'd hoped, but this shows kind of the structure of labor market changes over the past 40 years. And you can see that there's growth in high skill, high wage jobs, and growth in low skill, low wage jobs. And you see a reduction in middle skill, middle wage jobs. And what that's attributable to primarily is globalization and kind of the first phase of automation in factories. Chat GPT is going to be coming after jobs across this spectrum. And there's going to be a lot more disruption, and it's going to be a lot faster, and it's going to be across the spectrum. And so our students are entering this world where like the future of learning is working, and they're going to be in this mold where they just have to be constantly learning and working and learning and working. And so one way to think about this is to encourage students to find a problem that they want to work on, because specific jobs are going to be much more in flux, and they need to just be constantly prepared to be learning and enrolling in courses or self-taught to keep pace with the labor market implications of these tools. So I know that was a big second topic to throw in the last 3 minutes, but my time is up, and I'll end there and look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks very much. And I'm glad that you zoomed out to those bigger questions. Let's talk about, see if there are people who would like to, raise questions or have comments, to dig in a little bit to where you think that some of the equity issues are, especially on campus and classrooms. I think, the points that you were making, Mike, especially that, this is in some ways changing the rules quite rapidly. And I think our experience is that that's always, it widens inequity at first, lack of structure, lack of clarity, the shifting of the rules, and that there may be a lot of assumptions that all students have a certain way of navigating this that are false, as Craig said at the beginning, that we're assuming that our reference points are their reference points. So really interested in having people weigh in or speak up, drop comments or raise your hand if you'd like to talk about, whether you think this is going to be an issue on your campus and whether you think that this shifting of the ground beneath our feet is itself an equity question. So thank you. Annabelle has dropped in a question. What will be the impact of the combination of adaptive learning and AI? Annabelle, do you want to first maybe say a little bit more about that question, and then we can discuss it? I don't want to put you on the spot, but
yeah, sure. So, because you got tools increasingly like Grammarly, right, that are integrating adaptive learning strategies, like from methodology with AI tools. So from your expertise, what you think will be the impact on higher ed, specifically to equity, diversity, and inclusion? Does it make sense? Is that wide enough of a question, or you need more? Well, I guess I'm the expert, so they know more than I do, so.
Yeah, I can give a take, and then I'm sure Mohammed might have some comments as well. This is his area of expertise too, and Craig. But I think so. Adaptive learning has a lot of promise, and it has been implemented across a number of domains already. And basically, what these kind of evolutions of artificial intelligence enable is faster and more accurate and more precise forms of adaptive learning that account for more nuanced differentiation between kinds of learners. So I think that's exciting. I think one thing that I worry about and that I didn't get to talk as much about in my talk is that all of these systems that are built, however, are trained on existing sample data, and the composition of that sample data often reflects historical inequalities, and it may reflect preferences for learning of certain types of people that don't reflect the majority or the hardest to reach learners. And so the challenge is in ensuring that these AI systems and adaptive learning systems account for the wide variation and differentiation of needs of different kinds of learners, and not just kind of optimize for a mean or median learner that's not like reflective of our goals of inclusion and equity.
Sure. So it might augment biases, like putting minorities in lower math levels and so forth, right? Is that what you're?
Yeah, so that, but I mean, it might even be, so for example, if a college educated learner is engaging in an adaptive system and they are used to, doing college level assignments that are very unstructured and self-directed, versus what a high school graduate might need. The data that any adaptive system is trained on is going to like reflect like whatever input data it has access to. And if that input data is biased toward any population, it might not serve a broader population's needs.
Thank you. Mohammed, I think Mike mentioned you.
yeah, let me call Mohammed in. Let's call Mohammed in here and maybe comment on that, and then we can maybe also address University of Iowa's question next about inequitable data, et cetera. But Mohammed, do you have something to say about the adaptive learning question?
Yeah. Thanks to the speakers and also Annabelle for the question. So I think with AI, it makes our job to provide timely intervention easier, like with classes or like online platforms where there are many students, teachers, or those who are behind these platforms are hard to provide personalized interventions, adaptive systems, which are like mostly could be allocated with timely interventions or feedback to specific needs. So AI can help us to do that on a scale. However, there is an issue is that when there is mistaken algorithms, I saw a question about who, like if the training data is wrong, then all the algorithms will be missed, right? So there is a big margin of having mistaken personalization, which of course can affect our students. So it's really an issue. While we see that AI can provide a lot of potential, we also have to consider the consequences of fallacy algorithms, a large margin of errors of these algorithms, and how it might affect the personalization. So I think we cannot replace teachers completely by AI systems, but teachers' involvement and their presence to check out some of these interventions and personalization will be important.
Okay, thank you, Mohammed.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I'm wondering if we could maybe just probe a little bit, and this would be to all three speakers if you have thoughts, but also to the whole audience, or all the participants. If you're concerned about this, if you're concerned that adaptive learning is somehow biased, or some of the other data that's being used is biased, and you're just your orientation, which is the orientation of most of the people at this institute, is just wanting to create, the right network of support for equity students. Who is it that you would be talking to on campus, that you'd be seeking out? Who are the key players that you think should be at least brought into the conversation? I just came from a session. We were talking about building cross-functional teams across silos to create, better, more coherent networks of support. If you're concerned about the advent of AI-driven tools and their relationship to equity, who are some of the stakeholders that you'd want to bring together if you're interested in having these conversations?
If I may just like I saw Randy's, that of course this is a hard question, and I think there's no clear answer to that, but I saw that there are new institutions here in Europe that are recruiting in new jobs, like ethical officer, at some institutions. But till that moment, I think people will mostly go to people or like employees with the IT background. But is that enough? I don't think so, because we need people with also different backgrounds, not only from with technical background, but we also might be people with pedagogical background, with education background, to help in certain issues. And also maybe some of the questions for people who are using adaptive systems is that, I have an issue with my data, or like I saw some breach or something, then you might need a different person. So I think it's really, maybe we need to build a new ecosystem, where different or new stakeholders are there to help with these new AI systems and advanced technologies in education.
Mm-hmm.
Well, as part of that, so I think after you asked the question, there was this long pause that no one responded, right? And that pause should give us some pause. So who is the person? So do we go to? And right now, those that are in DEI, which is probably most of us in some fashion, there is a lens on us, right? And that lens is highly focused. So when the climate so that we're currently in. So being mindful of that and how AI is influencing that, not directly, but in an indirect way, is who are the people we talk to? So my department has asked me to talk about AI in like the fall. And so I'm trying to gather people around campus that can talk about AI. And it's kind of we do AI as an aside. I mean, there's no one that's the AI go-to person. So is it the computer science department? Is someone in the provost OGS office? Is it someone in some other department? I mean, so it's that freeze frame that we're being asked about AI, and we're still trying to figure it out.
Yeah, I think the pause is really illustrative. I think it's a great question, Randy, and I think it's difficult. I mean, I think the first thing that jumps out in my mind is like, how good is your data at identifying common points of friction of the student experience? And like, I think ensuring that there are systems in place to identify like likely friction points across the student experience is kind of like the first thing, because you have to have a hypothesis of where to start asking and looking around. But who owns that job on a university campus, I think, is really difficult question. And I do think like dean's offices historically have been supportive, but it can often be academic advisory units and even RAs, and also just creating spaces and environments so that students feel comfortable themselves just speaking when they're encountering difficulty. Because I think like that's the hardest thing, right, is actually knowing when students are being negatively impacted. They're the most they're like the best people to inform universities of that, but making sure that they have the spaces and that they feel comfortable like doing so is kind of a prerequisite.
Yeah, so interesting. I mean, we talk a lot about how for a long time it's getting a little bit better. DEI work was very distributed in lots of corners for all kinds of historical and institutional reasons. If the AI responsibility is so distributed and people aren't talking to each other, then it's almost certain that the DEI and the AI people are not talking to each other. So to me, if there's any takeaway from this session already, is that we need to be more mindful heading into the fall of how to connect DEI and AI people together. And the equity folks who are here at the Institute, just even thinking about asking those questions of how do we build coalitions to even have this conversation. I think the other thing that I'll just raise, because it seems to flow from this, and then we can go to Jordan's question, which I think will take us in a slightly different direction, also equity related, is who's having the conversation about the financial access. I mean, you raised this, Craig, the financial access to these tools. Some things like Grammarly, there are free versions, but there's pay versions. And that was always the problem with Chegg. And there may even be soon a commercial version, or there is now a paying commercial version of ChatGPT. But we were just meeting with someone from OpenAI. They don't have an institutional pricing system yet. So an institution couldn't even buy an enterprise version of ChatGPT. But if some of your students are paying a subscription to a better version of ChatGPT, that in itself is a structural inequality. Is it an institution's responsibility to make the latest, the best that's available, AI tools available equitably across campus, the way that Canvas or the LLM, not to lionize that, but that it's a democratized resource. So I think that that's another dimension of bringing DEI and AI together, is asking which of these are for pay. It's almost as if we need to do another cycle around open educational resources and textbook costs to come back to thinking about now, how does AI add a whole new layer to what inequitable instructional resources might look like? So I think this is really a profound and important question about AI and DEI that seems very just barely at the beginning of exploring. So thank you. Jordan, would you like to sort of articulate your question rather than me just reading it? Would you up for that? Yeah, great. Thank you.
Sure, I can do that. Yeah, thank you, Randy. And thank you, to the three of you for just really, powerful insights and really opening up this conversation about AI. Something that I've been thinking about recently is the diversity or lack thereof in like the actual AI workforce, and thinking more specifically about the pathways that individuals have, from undergrad, even starting as early as high school, into this field of artificial intelligence. And so I've tried to kind of locate numbers to see representation along the lines of race, gender, ability. And I've found numbers as far as diversity in the field of computer science more generally, but it just seems like there's not a lot of public information on, like who is being represented as far as who's like actually building the algorithm so that students feel, seen and represented in the way just that AI is responding to students and engaging with students. And a specific example that I'll kind of highlight, and then I would love to hear your thoughts, is about a year ago, the University of Nevada, Las Vegas rolled out an AI version of the president of the university, and kind of like made like a artificial intelligence version of the president, and like students could go onto this platform to have conversations about admissions, financial aid, to be able to ask questions that were particular to their situation. And it was supposed to make families feel like they were talking to like a trusted university leader. And there were obviously some pros and cons to it. And this was well before Chat GPT was in the mainstream. Thank you, Sarah, for bringing that up in the chat. But I wonder the role of and the importance of diversity, behind these kinds of platforms, and whether there are any numbers or data on that right now.
Any of our speakers, is a very compelling question. Any of our speakers have any insight onto that?
I did look at that so early on, and I didn't find much of anything. So I think because of private companies, they don't have a mandate or a requirement to make things. So you're open to us. They can kind of do what they want. And so I agree with you. I think that's something that would be useful to find out more about.
Yeah, I think I also don't have the specific data, but I know that the technology industry more broadly, and like folks who are engineers and data scientists, that advantaged groups are overrepresented, and traditionally underrepresented groups are underrepresented, and that does impact how these tools are built, and how these experiences are designed. And so I think it's a great question, and I think that it's something that we have to keep pushing on and try to raise the consciousness of like the companies doing it. So yeah, I think it's a great thing to flag.
Yeah, thanks for that. Thanks for that, Jordan. Sounds like it's still a very much an open question. Thank you. I wondered if maybe if Mohammed, just invite you to, if you wanted to share a few minutes of some thoughts. One of the things I thought would be interesting is, are there more dimensions of thinking about some of these intersections of AI, algorithm, and equity that we might want to introduce in the discussion? And maybe you can address that, but then also you and possibly Mike, because I know some of your work's on this, is what can we learn from, like, say, the MOOC moment that we can take here? People do keep comparing it. I keep saying the one thing that's different from MOOCs is that we didn't have 350 educational technologists begging the world to put MOOC research on pause while we figure this out. So there's clearly something more going on than just MOOCs, but there is a lot of analogy there. And I wonder if we can talk about that. But first, Mohammed, let me just turn to you, just if you would like something to share or respond to around some of these intersections of AI, algorithms, and equity.
Yeah. Thanks, Randy. So, of course, I have a lot of notes, but because of the time, maybe I'll just like 2 minutes per our speakers. I really like what Great showed us is that, like, teachers see the students and, the classes, but then the students are surrounded by many issues, like the trauma, the financial issues, the others. So this is where like human perspective is important. And also, as Mike mentioned, like AI doesn't feel like emotions, right? There is no empathy there, but humans is important to realize that. Is that what I want to stress is that currently, and who knows in the future, is that AI cannot replace humans. It's helping, but it cannot replace a human. The other thing, what I liked about Greg talk is that he mentioned an amazing examples that how algorithm function to show what people like to have, but at some point doesn't show the reality. And ChatGPT at the moment lies a lot. So it can tell a lot of lies. It's not all truth, right? Because it is trained of what people write and train the system. And then there was one question there: what if this training data is wrong? What will happen? So what will happen is that we will have incorrect results. So this is absolutely very much relevant to equity and how reliability are this information. So that was one thing. And the other thing is also related to Mike and Greg, was that AI not perfect to create new nuances. So what I want to mention is that a lot of AI systems is not a search engines like Google. So it doesn't search the internet and give you results, but it is a natural language processing software that allocate words together to create you a readable information. So this is very important for people to realize who rely on AI systems, is that it just like create words that looks like very much reality, but it might entails a lot of lies. So with that being said, I want to relate some of what mentioned by Mike and Greg, is that we did a studies that we asked ChatGPT to create 50 essays. Okay, me as a student, we asked it to create 50 essays, and then we took these 50 essays and sent it to Turnitin. You know, Turnitin is a plagiarism detection tool, and surprisingly, Turnitin couldn't identify more than 20 or 30% of these essays to be not plagiarized. So this is very much surprising, is that at the moment, the current plagiarism check tools are not sufficiently enough to detect plagiarized text or AI generated text. So this is also, you know, shows how to use these AI tools responsibly. So some last things about Mike's example of what he showed about that academic paper essay is that being written. So there has been a blog being like viral in Norway, where libraries at Norwegian institutions received a lot of fake received a lot of inquiries about getting books of not existent references. So as I said, there are lies there that it gives incorrect information. So it showed some references from 2025, but they really do not exist. This is also very important example of how critical are these AI systems, and responsible usage of that, and how reliable and original the findings are. So these are some of the points. Of course, we can keep talking about it, but I just like these were some of my comments. Yeah.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful. And wow, what an interesting, what an interesting and simple study to have it generate 50 essays and see how many Turnitin can spot. That itself is very powerful. And I imagine that percentage will only go down as the tool gets more sophisticated. Mike, do you want to make just a minute or two comment on just a couple of minutes on what we might be able to learn from the sort of MOOC moment to bring into this moment?
Yeah, so let me, I did have some slides on this that I skipped over. So Randy and others will know this, but the hope was that MOOCs would sort of democratize learning, and the reality was that overwhelmingly the people who enrolled already had college degrees, which just to note, there's nothing sort of inherently wrong with that. But it's just an issue when you hope that something can lower barriers, but access alone is sort of insufficient. It needs to be meaningful access. And then the other problem that this raises, and this is work that I did on my PhD, is that there's this issue of early adopter iteration bias. So I think someone asked in the chat, like, if the training data is bad and so the AI is bad, like who owns that problem? Well, one of the challenges is that right now the only owner of that problem is the market, and the market innovates and adapts for what early adopters want. And early adopters have more access to resources. They typically are better educated and have more means to trial new tools. But all that data is what is used to iterate these products. And so this is a challenge. It was a challenge among the MOOCs experience. It's probably going to be a challenge that we see on ChatGPT. But this is just like a different way of stating like the training data problem, that if the training data doesn't reflect the values and the goals that we are aiming toward, then the AI systems are also not going to. And so, yeah. Randy, is that go over what you were hoping?
Yeah, no, that's great. And, you know, my understanding also, I've seen other data. I know this was not exactly your work, which was that, you know, I saw one paper that also showed that there was even a widening of inequity, because if more degree holding,
Right,
generally advantaged people were accessing MOOCs, it was actually then embellishing their academic and educational advantage, so that it was actually generating inequity, and not just you know, reflecting the current state of it.
yeah. Thanks for that prompt, Randy. I think I should say, and how all these pieces kind of tie together, is that as artificial intelligence hollows out certain parts of the labor market, online learning, flexible learning, continuous education is going to become more and more important, so that people can be retrained and redeployed to new careers. And as you just noted, the people that are most prepared for their jobs to be lost are higher educated users who know how to learn, and online learning has been sort of optimized for that audience. And in the case of MOOCs, you see people using it to further their labor market advantage, which ends up amplifying these inequalities that you know.
Yeah, very interesting. Well, we're coming toward the end of our time. I wonder if I could just ask each of you for a final comment, if and maybe, you know, sort of 30 to 60 seconds on what's something that our folks might do when they get back to campus that would just advance this work. And anybody be willing to offer that, just a short piece of advice, or anything last thing that you wanted to say that you didn't say, if you want to ignore my prompt. But I'd love to see if we can end on what people might do when they go back to campus. Anyone want to start?
Yeah, sure.
Great.
What are the policies for using AI at your school? What are yours? Is there a point person asked? So are you able to get demonstrations? How are you using AI, or how is your schools using AI to better the student experience? I think AI has a lot of potential, such as the adaptive aspects of AI, because that is a form of AI. Being able to play with AI, but staying grounded, but recognizing that using AI is a good place to start, but not to finish. It gets you going in the right direction. It's one thing I talk about a lot with students is blank screen. They get to write a paper and they have this blank screen and they don't know what to write. Well, AI can help them start to do the brainstorming aspects, and then they get something on the page and then they can get going. And that's, I think, one of the strong points with AI. to start the process.
But those policies may be part of that level playing field also. So learning about those policies very important. Okay.
Right, and one quick thing about that, as of I think the beginning of the year, only 15% of schools had AI guidelines or something like that, and for faculty it was only like 18%. I'm sure that's gone up, but half of students, if not more, are actually using AI. So there's a big disparity between those two.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. That's very interesting. All right, Mike, and then Mohammed, 30 seconds each. Pull it out here.
Yeah. So I think very concretely, I would start using all of these tools as much as you possibly can, because they're not as scary as they seem. They're super useful and applicable to a lot of different parts of our lives. They help write emails and do all these things that are just so boring. And so just use them and it will inform you how your students use them. And then two, try to find out from students how they're using them, because they are finding the most innovative, creative, hacky ways to use these tools. And that will inform, just how to approach this moving forward.
Perfect. Mohammed?
Yeah. So from my experience, students like to make shortcuts to success. So maybe at your campus, whenever you have some assignments, and based off the current failure of the current plagiarism detection tools, I would say you need to be innovative about the assignments you give to your students, and involve critical thinking and some as well active participation of your students. So we need to change our method of providing assignments or dealing with the students at the moment with the emergence of AI tools. So we need to keep that in mind. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you all for being here. Thank the three of you, Craig, Mike, and Mohammed. This is all brand new territory, so I really appreciate that we were really trying to take this on and peel the layers of the onion off. So I think it was a really stimulating session. Thank you to all of you who came. And thanks for getting to the end of day 2. And we'll see you all tomorrow. So take care, everyone.